me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Well, good afternoon, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday, Cello Chat time. With me today is Dessislava Nenova. Welcome to the program, and I hope you're doing well, Dessislava.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm doing great. How are you?
Terrific. I'm doing well. I'm just, like you say, just trying to stay cool.
Yes, it's been a bit hotter than we're used to, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I'm very southern Wisconsin, and you're Chicago, and we
Yes.
often get similar weather. But
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
funny sometimes there'll be something that just hits us and misses you, and vice versa.
Oh, for sure. There's change. I mean, when I drive even east, closer to the lake, it's cooler
Yeah,
than where I
sure.
am, than my
Right.
neighborhood. So yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to this. So let's start with your musical journey, which started in Bulgaria.
Yes.
How did you get? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I like to say there is a short version and a long version to me beginning to play the cello. And when I do school presentations, I actually like to tell the long version
Yeah.
because it's really not something that you would think I would want to share. But and you'll see why. So basically, in Bulgaria in kindergarten we have music teachers, and my music teacher used to ask me to sing for our programs, special occasions like Christmas and stuff like that. So I was always singing something, and so she told my mom, "Oh, she's pretty musical. You should take her to the music school. She should maybe start lessons or something." And at the time, we're talking about a whole another neighborhood school and all that. Like we didn't know where to go, what to do, and so my mom was like, "Okay, but who do I go to? What do I do?" And my teacher said, "Well, just go knock on a door." Okay, so we go to the music school, and it was this particular building just for strings. And so we go into the building that's just for strings, and we literally knock on the first door once we enter. And my cello teacher opened the door. And so my mom told him what my music teacher had said. And so he made me sing some tunes. He made me transpose them from different pitches. He made me clap quarter notes while singing different rhythms, because that's how they check your sense of rhythm. And
Uh-huh.
so and so he told my mom, he was like, "Yeah, she should audition for the music school because you can start music lessons in music school first grade." And so my mom was like, "Okay." So she signs me up for the audition, and I go, and I'm 6 years old. And because I don't yet play an instrument, all I had to do is solfege, is what we called it.
Mhm.
So basically, same exact thing. They say, "Why don't you sing us a song?" And then I sing something. Then they ask me to transpose it. Then they ask me to repeat certain pitches. They'll play me different things on the piano. I had to repeat the same pitch to check sense of pitch. And then came the time to clap and sing rhythm. So it was clapping quarter notes while singing a rhythm with ta ta ta.
Mhm.
Well, I was not in the mood to do that, apparently, that day, and I refused to do the rhythm exercise or whatever that was at the time for the test. And so when we went to check the results, there was a line which meant, only the people above the line were accepted, and I was first under the line. And so I was not accepted into the music school, which
Mhm.
really infuriated my mom because she was like, "Why would you do something like that? Why didn't you want to do this? Why wouldn't you clap?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just didn't feel like it." And so she was like, "Well, what do we do now?" Because now the decision has to be made whether I start at another school first grade, or, what do we do? And so basically she's like, "Okay, we'll hold you back. So we'll start the following year." And I wanted to play piano. So I said, "Okay, that's fine." And I'll play piano with the uncle. And she's like, "What uncle are you talking about?" I said, "The uncle who I met at the music school." And she said, "The uncle teaches cello." And I was like, "But I want to study piano with him." So long story short, or long story long, as I like to say, I started playing the cello because I fell in love with my cello teacher, whom I randomly met when I was 6 years old. And thanks to being
That's funny.
stubborn. So that's my
Wow.
story of how I
That
began cello.
that's an unusual one. I like that. Well,
Um,
in the testing of rhythm, I
mhm.
mean, I'm remembering from decades ago, the first time hearing the Bulgarian choir that came to where I was, and the mixed meters that constantly happen. I imagine they could really put you through the ringer with rhythm and meter.
Yes, it's really interesting you mentioned this because I completely forgot that they also, the choirs, we had a very well-known choir in my city, and the conductor would go from school to audition kids. And they also ended up recruiting me for the choir. But then my cello teacher said, you cannot carry two watermelons under one armpit. And so my choir career was short-lived.
Huh.
But in terms of the rhythms, it's really interesting because I grew up with those. When we had to play the Rite of Spring or something, mixed meters for me, it's not that big of a deal. It just feels so natural, and I'm just like, it's just a two plus a three. It's not that bad. Just feel the three like a wave. It's okay.
That's funny. That's funny. But so before we go on with the rest of your education,
Yes.
I remember reading somewhere in your bio about how you find inspiration in the human voice. So, I mean, you
Yes.
you still channel the quality of the voice when you play and when you teach, is that right?
Yes, it's so my first teacher, the one I fell in love with when I was 6 years old, and in a very obviously teacher-like way.
Right.
Um, he told me when I was so young, he said, you have to try to play the way you would sing something. So
Yeah.
sing it first and then try to play it that way because that's the most natural way to create the phrase. And so it kind of really left an imprint in my head that, I mean, not only is the cello the closest to the human voice, but we want to also play whatever instrument we play. We want to play it as though it's a vocal line, and
Mhm.
I still think that that's the easiest way um, to make music and also to engage people, to understand what we're doing musically. Um, and so I've also found it very moving to play with choirs because of that. I just love collaborating with choirs.
Yeah.
It's just the immersive sound of a choir touches me in a way that I don't know. It's a different feeling, I guess. It's
Yeah,
very it's very intimate in a way.
yes, right, right. It goes straight to the musical soul. It's great.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
All right. So how did your musical education continue from there?
So I was in music school doing cello lessons and went through a specific it was a music high school, and then once I finished, basically I had to make a decision whether I wanted to go to Sofia Conservatory, the
Hmm.
National Conservatory of Music in Sofia, or to come to the United States. That's kind of where I was, and so I was like, well, I decided Bulgaria was a little small for me. And so I came to the United States to do my undergrad here. Um, and that's also a funny story because I don't advertise this very much. I don't think I even put it in my bio, but I went to University of Central Arkansas for my undergrad.
Hmm.
And if you tell that to anyone, I think most people would be like, Arkansas, unusual. But again, the long story there is that I don't know if you know the late Kevork Marderosyan, or Marderosian, I think they call him here. He's a violinist who used to teach at Indiana University. But at the time, he was actually on the faculty of University of Central Arkansas, and he's from my hometown.
Hmm.
And so he would recruit a lot of Bulgarian musicians, and we all were on scholarships. And so this is kind of how I ended up in Arkansas. But I was very fortunate, and I actually consider myself lucky because my teacher there was an assistant to Janusz Starker at Indiana University. And so most of the things that I teach in terms of technique and the whole body awareness aspect, it comes from there.
Hmm.
That's where I would say my formal training really about how to play the cello technically came from.
Nice, nice. But then you also did studies in Michigan.
Yes, and then I continued on and did my master's and doctorate at Michigan State, which was sort of, in a way, was like returning to my roots because
Hmm.
my first teacher was a Moscow Conservatory graduate, and
Hmm.
then my last teacher was a Moscow Conservatory graduate.
Huh.
So it was very interesting for me because it was like I learned a certain way, and then I had to switch to a completely different way of learning when I did my undergrad. And from there, I was like, I kind of miss what I had before. And so I chose Michigan State because Suren Bagratuni, my teacher there, was a Moscow conservatory graduate and also silver medalist, Tchaikovsky competition silver medalist winner. And I was like, oh,
Wow. Yeah.
I have to go there. And I was also a teaching assistant there. So
Right.
that's where I ended my degrees and my schooling.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, if I can ask a follow-up question there too, I think
Yeah.
again, youngsters today, a lot of the folks watching um, Cello Chat and things online like this, I'm not sure that they know as well as maybe, it's not as common knowledge as it used to be, kind of the difference between, say, the French and the Russian schools of teaching. And then the other thing that comes to my mind a little bit, I don't know if, like, proximity wise, in my mind, Hungary and Bulgaria are close enough. Was there an influence of the kind of the Hungarian approach as well, the like the Popper lineage, or was Bulgaria at the time mostly Moscow, Russian approach?
Well, that's a good question. In my school in particular, that kind of became a little bit of a sore point
Hmm.
because we had two cello teachers, and my cello teacher, as I said, was a Moscow graduate, and the other cello teacher, I believe, was trained in Western Europe.
Hmm.
I think her pedigree was through France or something. So we had a little bit of there was a little bit of friction there.
Hmm.
As you know, it can be sometimes if people are really stuck in their ways in terms of how things have to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But specifically for Bulgaria, I would say that actually it was a mixed bag.
Huh.
We had quite a few people that were Western Europe trained, and actually maybe less graduates from Moscow Conservatory, believe it or not.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I think it's because historically, what people don't know about Bulgaria is that we were when we were a kingdom, our kings were Germanic.
Hmm.
So we actually also, when we fought in World War One and Two, we fought with Germany.
Hmm. Huh.
Believe it or not,
Yeah.
it's a bit odd because
Yeah.
everybody connects us to what used to be Soviet Union or Russia or whatever, but actually we were kind of Western looking
Hmm.
government wise before, like earlier on. So um, that's why we wouldn't be as Moscow Conservatory looking as you would think.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so another thing that an expression I remember in the write-ups about you online is genre bending. And I
yeah.
know, for example, young cellists these days, there's some of them who are they're already plugged into playing the cello in classical and non-classical ways. And then there are others who just kind of, I think, really just haven't been exposed to it. And then there's maybe kind of a third category where they're aware that it's possible to go outside of the classical world, but they're kind of nervous about it. So I'm just kind of wondering, what is your um, what is your own history with playing the cello in all sorts of styles of music? And then what sort of advice do you give to your students who are maybe a little bit nervous sometimes about going outside of either reading everything off of the printed page or the kind of the classical canon approach?
Mhm. Well, I have to say that sometimes, we have to create opportunities for ourselves, and they're not always where you'd expect. And so obviously living in Chicago, there's so many musicians here. And multiple great music schools. And so if you're looking for only play classical music, your choices kind of can be a little bit limited.
Mhm.
And for me, I've always been curious about other music. I mean, I liked pop music when I was a kid, so I've never been a purist.
Uh-huh.
I'm not one of these people who is like, no, only classical music and the
Mhm.
rest is just not worth, playing or whatever. I'm not like that. I've always thought that you can find good quality music in different genres, and I became interested actually in playing pop music back when I was in Arkansas, because I was playing in the Arkansas Symphony. And we used to do a lot of pop concerts, and I actually really enjoyed it. So I was like, it'd be kind of cool to play in a pop orchestra. I like this. And so when I came to Chicago, um, I met another Bulgarian who does a lot of jazz.
Hmm.
A friend of mine who probably does jazz 90% of the time, most
Uh-huh.
of the time. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting, because jazz is a very different thing. I mean, jazz and pop are not the same, obviously. And with pop music, we get, most of the time, we actually get actual parts. So you can read your music. You don't have to think terribly hard. It's not as stressful, except in the beginning it is, because you're not used to it. I remember in the very beginning that I was relieved when I had to sight read classical music, because that's what I was used to. Even if it were more difficult than a simple pop tune, which we know, pop music tends to be less complicated in many ways. I would say in most ways, um, except maybe rhythmically. Rhythmically, every once in a while,
Yeah.
there are certain things that you look in and you don't understand what it means, the
Mhm.
way things are grouped. Um, but what was very intimidating to me was playing jazz, because you get a lead sheet, or a chart, we call it. So you
Yeah.
basically have a vocal line, and then you have chords. And then good luck with everything. We hope you know some theory. And we really hope that you can create something that matches the vibe, whatever that is. And I have to say, I'm generally very grateful when I play jazz with piano, because the piano does so much that
Mhm.
it can create sort of literally the vibe. It can initiate the style. So, if you want to do like a bossa nova type, or if you want to do a swing, or if you want to do I don't know, like the more I would call it intellectual, later jazz.
Mhm.
I prefer old school like Ella and Louis, but so so in that respect, it kind of the difficulty of playing different genres. Of course, the first thing is theory, as you know, because you also are I was reading a little bit. I didn't realize your PhD's in theory,
Yeah.
which is awesome. I've always loved theory. So I used to analyze things because, again, my formal training, my first teacher used to tell me that I needed to not only think melodically, but also harmonically
Mhm.
when we thought about phrasing. And so I've always looked at music that way. So up and
Right.
down and this and
Yeah.
melodically or phrase. And so you do have to have a decent theory knowledge if you want to go into jazz.
Hmm.
And I don't mean to say like I wouldn't consider myself a jazz player by any means. I would say I started a few years ago being interested in it, and I'll play gigs and I will even improvise and stuff. And it's a learning process, just like with classical music. It takes years. Um, I'm just saying this is not, I don't consider myself a great authority on this, but I would say that you do have to really know your theory for jazz. For pop, um,
Yeah, not so much.
not so much.
Okay, now let's tie that in then with, do you have advice for any people watching this who are considering, who think that they'd like to try and be able to play studio recording
Mm,
gigs,
hmm
where they are very conscientious of time. Time is money, and
hmm
you have to get a good take now.
hmm Yeah, that's a good question. I used to do a lot of recordings, studio recordings, and for this specifically, it doesn't matter, like playing your scales and doing your technical studies, making sure that you play in tune, that is very important. And I mean, the basics are important no matter what genre you're playing, obviously. And so, but in a studio recording, pitch is very important, especially if you have to record multiple lines, because there was one time I would have to, I think I recorded three different harmonies all by myself. And so obviously you have to play in tune, or otherwise it's not going to work very well harmonically. But also, as you said, they would not really enjoy in the studio having to take too many having to do too many takes
Yeah,
because you're having pitch issues, So the basics are necessary no matter what you're doing. Good rhythm, good pitch.
yeah,
Uh, that's always going to be important. And so I torture. I like to say I torture my students with scales all the time.
yeah, yeah. Well, and in terms of having good intonation, my own limited experience with studio recordings is that the the type of intonation, the standard of intonation is
Mm.
equal temperament. In
Mm,
other words, to
yeah.
sometimes string players can almost go too far down the rabbit hole of, oh, well, this is sympathetic vibrations that I get from my instrument, and just intonation that rings so well,
hmm
but
hmm
they want piano intonation.
This is such a great point. It drives me crazy when people start with the flat and the sharp and the third and I'm just like, I cannot. If we all had to think that way, how can we match each other's interpretation of this much higher and this much lower? It makes no sense to me. And I also have perfect pitch. So you can talk to me all day long about this having to be a little high or a little low, but my ear says this is where B is, and B is going to be there, and it doesn't matter what scale it is or what key I'm in or what. I just
Right.
cannot. And so but along this line, I started tuning specifically to a tuner um in my mid-20s, because my stand partner at the time in the orchestra, who was actually, she was from one of the ex-Russian republics. Is
All
she?
right.
I don't want to make a mistake, so I'm not going to
All
say
right,
where
all
she's
right,
from
all right,
because
yeah.
I don't want to get in trouble. But anyway, Irina, so she said, you know, it's okay to tune this way if you're playing alone, but you know, when you're playing in
Mhm,
an orchestra or when you're playing, you should tune to the tuner. And I was like, you know what, that makes sense.
mhm.
And so I started tuning to a tuner. And then I had another friend, a violinist, who is a total geek, one time say to me, your half steps are too narrow. And I was like, I don't, what do you mean? What do you mean my half steps are, you know, we were friends. I didn't get offended or anything. We talked to each other like that. And I've always been open-minded to people telling me stuff and learning. And so I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder what he meant by that. And so I started practicing chromatic scales.
Uh-huh.
Because before that, I wasn't really practicing chromatic scales. I was just doing, you know, major, minor, and
Right.
arpeggios.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, let me practice some chromatic scales. And so actually the whole well-tempered thing, I've lived with it for more than 20 years. And
Mhm.
for me, it's a very normal state, which I love. And so what happens sometimes is when you run into this thing that you're describing, people who are with, I don't know, their own ideas of this key sounds like that, and this key should sound like this, and the notes should be like that. And we never sound in tune together.
Mm. Yeah, especially on one take.
That will not work. Yeah, so when you're doing studio recording, you're playing with other people, but also you're playing with other instruments. So you can have winds, you'll have keys, you'll have guitars. So obviously, it's not a good idea to have your own personal interpretation of pitch. I would
All
say.
right, all right. Yeah. Okay, now another big topic I want to ask you about is like I think in your teaching philosophy, you say, again, the Eastern European approach, the Jana Starker, but the body awareness component you emphasize a lot, which I think is so important. I mean, it's very easy for well, not just young people, but I think even if it's adult learners starting to learn a string instrument, to not be aware of how I kind of want to use the word dangerous it is to misuse muscles over and over again and expect that your body's just going to go, oh well, So can you talk about your how you the body awareness idea infuses your approach to teaching?
Yes, I mean it that is foundational for me. I would say that that is probably the basis of everything I teach because I I mean I think logically as you said it or the way I like to also explain it is that it makes no sense for us to do certain things physically and overload our body with tension and then expect it to perform certain physical movements. And so it's kind of like if you really tighten your muscles in any way, even your legs, you wouldn't be able to walk. So why do we expect, or maybe we don't expect, but we don't think about the fact that we have so much tension and then we're trying to play simultaneously. So we're basically fighting our body, trying to perform very intricate movements, which it's a losing battle and results in injuries oftentimes.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have it's like let's see, I'm not entirely sure of which came first in terms of the history of
Mhm,
approaches to body awareness, but do you ever
mhm,
refer students, for example, to Alexander technique or
mhm.
Feldenkrais or things along those
Yes.
lines?
Yeah, so the way that I was introduced to this actually was my teacher in Arkansas, Phyllis Farrell, and I never asked her that question. I probably should. I don't know if this came from Starker or this came from it was her own thing, but she brought in a Feldenkrais person. She brought in an Alexander technique person. Like she was big into that, and I never asked, is this because you had an injury or why? But she was very adamant about how we used the body while we played, about the bad habit of our head going in, you know. So this whole thing started because of her. And just actually, this just reminds me that I remember I was practicing Tchaikovsky Romeo and Juliet overture.
Mhm.
And I remember practicing it, and I was playing something, I think it was one of the slow parts, and then I had to hit a bunch of 16-note passage. So I came to the passage and I started playing. And as I started playing the passage midway, I stopped and I literally told myself, what just happened? I felt a change in my body. And I was like, why? What? I just had to sit there and try to remember the sensation that went through my body. And I realized that I tightened, that my arms got tight. And this was all on my own. I don't know. I don't know why or what, but I felt this thing that sort of made it more difficult for me to play. And then what I did was I stopped, I went back and I said, okay, so now I'm gonna do the opposite. And the moment I hit the 16th notes, I'm gonna loosen up on purpose.
Yeah.
And I did that. And I was like, oh, this is so much easier. And so I taught myself actually at that point that every time from there on, every time I came to a passage, I knew I was really sort of either nervous about or scared about, or it was a lot of fast notes coming my way. I would try to on purpose loosen my muscles in the way that, you know, I mean, this is kind of a weird thing to throw in here, but you know, they say sometimes if you know you're gonna hit the car, like if you're if you're about to hit a car, yes, you want to relax your body as much as you can because you're less likely to injure yourself. So this is where it started. And then because, you know, of my own challenges and the fact that I had to go through physical therapy. So it became even more important for me to teach that because I want to prevent other people from having injuries and my students as well. Because yes, we're more likely to get injured later on in life, but actually if your body's relaxed, you're much more likely to be successful in making music in general, in expressing things better. So
yes. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, easier said than done to people who aren't in that habit, but they've got to start getting in that habit now. Yeah, that's great advice.
yes, and you know, this is true for everything. I mean, how many of us are holding tension doing just anything, any
Yes.
random thing?
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, great. Okay, last question.
yes.
So if you don't have a big concert coming up, I think there's some people who, I mean, they practically, I almost want to say exclusively drive their practicing based on the next thing that's coming up. And I mean, I think in an ideal world, we find a way to love the process of practicing and getting better and learning. So, what do you do, particularly in summer when we're not as just booked with concerts all the time as what can happen in the fall and the spring?
So I've always been one of these disciplined people, and I've had people jokingly call me Dr. Discipline.
Nice.
Um, but I try to explain to my students I can relate to that. I was a kid once, so I know the difficulty of staying motivated when the weather is nice and you want to hang out and I don't know, bike, swim, hike, whatever. So many things to do. Um, but what I try to remind them is that there's time for everything. And so first of all, if you want to do fun stuff, that's totally fine. So do your practicing in the morning and go do your fun stuff. The other thing is, if you're not in the mood to practice today, I get it. I'm not in the mood to practice every single day either. So oftentimes I would make deals with myself when I was younger, and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to practice 2 hours. There's no way I can survive 2 hours today. I don't want to do this, so I'll just do my scales. And at the time, skills and arpeggios took me 1 hour, if you can believe it or not, because I was doing all kinds of rhythmic and bowing patterns.
Right.
And so most of the time when I said, I'm just going to do an hour, I would end up doing my scales and then my etude. I've always loved scales and etudes. I don't know why. I don't know. It's very different from most people.
That's great.
But so what I tell my students is like, just say, I'll sit here and I'll try to do half of what I normally do. Just sit, because that's the hardest part. Once you sit and you start, it tends to become a little bit easier. And even if you do just your scales, even if you just do half an hour, you're going to be thankful tomorrow that you did that.
Yes. Yes.
And so I just I try to teach my students that, you know, I can relate to them. I can relate to that pain, and I know it's difficult, but it oftentimes comes down to discipline. It's something that we all love to play and not always to practice. And but if you want to sound good and if you want to maintain level, there's just no way around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's something you have to ask of yourself. So
Yeah. That's right. That's right. That's great. Wow. Lots of great stuff, Dr. Nova. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today, and I look forward to hearing my own students' reactions and thoughts, and um, but I sure appreciate your time. It's been wonderful having you on the show.
thank you. I appreciate it. I'd love to hear any feedback. If you hear anything
Yeah,
you want to relate to me, or if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
excellent. I'll pass along then. Great. Well, terrific, and hopefully our paths will cross one of these days.
Yes, that'd be great. If you're ever coming down this way or I'm going
Yeah,
up your way, we
terrific.
can
Excellent.
connect in person.
Terrific. All right. And for those of you out there watching, happy practicing, and we'll meet back at the same time next Friday. Take care.
You had me at